I think participants are also interested in networking. So networking is very significant and very useful, but we will have plenty time during the reception to chat between each other. So during the second session, which is entitled STS Locations, the chairman is Mr. Martin Haynes, or Captain Martin Haynes, literally, from Clyde & Co. Just to mention that we know Martin for the last 5 years, and we have a very strong affiliation by friendship with Clyde & Co., and we honor all the work that we have done in the past. And so we look forward for the second session. Martin, you're on the podium, and thank you very much.
Right. We okay? Good, good. Thank you very much, Alex, and welcome to the second session. I hope it's as interesting as the... Have a problem? We're okay? We're okay. One of the questions that wasn't answered, information regarding Rotterdam and STS operations. This question was put to me on the flight from London. And a person who asked me that question is unfortunately unable to attend today. But they were asking, in Rotterdam, in the port, a lot of barges come for the STS operation. A normal barge inside the port. And probably DYNAMARINe will be able to give more information, but how do you do a due diligence on a coastal barge inside the waters of Rotterdam? And they were having problems with this because they had no documentation whatsoever, no class certificates, no P&I certificate, zero inside the port. So I know Jan is here. He was going to comment as well, because clearly the Green Award would have to look at this in the future about what to do with barges. So I just put that in because it was a relevant question. Right, second session is about STS locations. We've already heard that it's a critical item. And certainly as a marine lawyer, casualty investigator, that's where we have the problems. And so I'll be very interested to know how these guys who operate in these areas are tackling those problems. So on today's panel here, we've got three great guys. Far end is Gordo and Ghirxi from Malta. He said his father, a career in journalism, very relevant to STS. And as always, the wife is the housewife. The mother was a housewife. 16-year-old, he joined his first ship, off an oil tanker off Callao in Peru. He served all ranks up to master, and he also served in reefers, heavy lifts, container feeders, and ro-ros. For the last 6 years, he has been a partner at P&S Limited, the only STS mooring masters organisation in Malta, and as a mooring master and POAC. Have safely completed over 200 STS operations. Does that qualify as experienced? You think so? I think so. Yeah. Somebody asked the question, well, he has 200. Mainly, obviously, in oil, but gas is a sector experiencing growth, and that's what we're seeing. And also a maritime consultant and accredited vessel inspector. In these roles, I have been involved in incident investigations and inquiries, marine warranty surveys, and vessel suitability surveys. He recently co-founded K Marine Limited, also with the objective of providing knowledge-based services to STS service providers and tanker operators and crews for the safer conduct of STS operations. So all credit to you, sir. I live in, he lives, not me. He lives in Gonzo, is that how you pronounce it? Gonzo. Sounds like the Muppets. My schedule involves free time, during which I enjoy football and outdoor activities with my wife and your 2 sons. Excellent, excellent. Well, we look forward to hearing what you have to say, Gordon. Please take the podium.
Okay, so it is okay. It is my privilege to be addressing you today here in Athens, capital of a nation with various maritime traditions and activity. We'll be discussing in this presentation STS Malta. Just to see what goes on, what we have, and I will share with you some of my thoughts, my experience, and outlook for what happens in Malta, what we do. So Malta is only a tiny island, but it is actually a great country, and in terms of the maritime industry, it can grow and provide that same greatness. So for tanker operators, for charterers, for tanker owners, there's a lot of opportunities. But thinking outside of the box of conventional STS operations, with the exception of one single oil terminal, the present oil storage facilities in Malta are decades old, built in times when the realities, the demands were not those of today. So modernizing and expanding these terminals is challenging, given the small size of the island and the built-up areas. And one option we look at is offshore storage on tankers. With regards to gas, LNG for the new power plant is already stored on ships offshore. We don't have storage of LNG onshore, it is offshore. So this is something that we will look at, we will consider. When it comes to gas, the yellow line there represents a proposed natural gas pipeline linking the European network with the new facility in Malta. So it provides opportunity for supply of natural gas through Malta or receiving natural gas from Malta. And it also provides the opportunity to linking the North African pipeline, which is the narrow line, over in Sicily, but it can still be used through Malta once it is built. Going back to conventional oil STSs, Regulation 42 of MARPOL requires oil tankers planning to participate in STS operations in the territorial waters or exclusive economic zones of a MARPOL state to notify that state not less than 48 hours in advance of the scheduled STS. Now, in Malta, STS operations within territorial waters are not permitted, and Malta does not have an exclusive economic zone. So reporting currently is not enforced, is not required. Wind distribution, it is mainly northwesterly, the predominant wind, I would say, followed with east-northeasterly winds, which during some days can be very strong. Wave distribution, wind waves obviously follow the wind northwesterly, and again, then followed by the northeasterly. But as a landmass, Malta being such a small island, it doesn't offer much lee. You can go around the island as much as you can, but being 13 miles outside territorial waters, you won't find much lee provided by the small landmass. Currents are also northwesterly, but if you take Malta there as an obstruction in the current, it tends to create some eddy currents, I would call them. So in different parts around the island, you can find different currents, but it is mainly northwesterly or westerly. At a latitude of 35 degrees, Malta has 4 seasons. Though winter is mild, it is your winter here in Athens is similar to the winter in Malta in many aspects. But it can be punctuated with very strong winds at times. Gales and thunder, the 2 top right slides there, I would take them into consideration because they can affect the conduct of STS operations. Precipitation and fog, the bottom slides, affect operations only during the approach, but I would add to that that during precipitation, when there's a heavy downpour, it can be accompanied with very strong squalls, very strong gusty winds, which for the unprepared, it can be hazardous. So strong gusty winds can be dangerous, and the vulnerability of the operation increases when the STS service provider is not backing the mooring master, the POAC, is not giving enough information to the ships. Now, it is necessary for mooring masters and crew to be on their tiptoes during operations at all times, comparing actual weather situations with what has been forecasted, and ship movements with how the ships are behaving in respect to the weather conditions observed, because any changes can be hazardous. In this slide here, if we look at the maximum wave height, this was May 2015. We get typical scenarios like this one during spring and autumn especially. In a matter of 6 hours, the wave height is from 2 meters, it goes up to 6 meters. It increases rapidly. During spring and autumn, we experience this a lot. And so this requires updated forecasts to be provided to the vessels. Now, a forecast like this, and a similar one here, this is just over a month ago, February 2018, again from 2.5 meters up to 6 meters. A forecast like this is accurate in terms of what you should expect, but we shouldn't take its accuracy as absolute in terms of times as well. If it says that the wind is going to increase, the waves are going to increase at 9 o'clock in the morning, we shouldn't stick to that rigidly. It could be before, it could be after. So we have to be on alert at all times. We won't set our alarm clocks at 9 o'clock to see what's happening, if it is increasing or not. We have also to take into consideration that the operation window has to take also the unfendering, the disembarkation of personnel, and the return of them safely to port on a small workboat. So just because the ship can handle 3-meter waves, 5-meter waves when the ship is alone, it doesn't mean that the personnel and the equipment can be recovered safely into port. When it comes to the conduct of STS operation, sea room is unrestricted in most directions. But STS operations are becoming numerous, frequent outside Malta, and therefore a safe distance needs to be maintained from this. We have to see what's happening before starting an approach. Furthermore, VHF channels could be very busy, so ships need to identify themselves, because it is not always possible to find a free channel or a channel that is not being used for another STS operation. So it is important that ships identify themselves by name before and during all communications. Extensive good holding ground for anchoring exists to the east of Malta. So when conducting an approach, that has to be taken into consideration, and we have to find areas, of which there are plenty, but that will keep us away from the anchorage area. This allows for STS operations to be conducted once the vessel clears the anchorage, go do the operation, come back down to the anchorage if weather is suitable. Or else the vessels can drift after making all fast and return to the anchorage only when it is suitable. Or don't return at all, just drift freely until the operation is completed. You can see here that the current has taken the vessels down from the northwest to the southeast. It changed easterly, but it is always flowing into that direction. Once the operation is completed, the ships are separated, and then you can return and you're free to move. It also allows for the operation to commence well away from the anchorage area, but coming down to the anchorage, so that once the vessels are all fast, ready, and if they had planned to go to anchor after the operation, they can proceed directly to the anchorage. If weather is suitable and the vessels are well equipped, the ship to be lightered can remain on anchor and the vessel can approach on a standing moor. It is not always acceptable to some tanker owners, so it has to be agreed beforehand what type of operation is going to be done. Resources available, well, small workboats. We have mentioned at some stage the support vessels. The workboats available in Malta can tow primary fenders alongside, and then they will have the baby fenders and the hoses on deck. So the primary fenders are towed alongside. Some boats are only certified to work up to 25 nautical miles from Malta. There's only 2 or 3 boats that are actually certified to proceed further than the 25 miles into international waters. So we have to take that into consideration when determining which boats we use. Safety of personnel. We have an ongoing issue about this because not all boats are equipped to recover personnel from the water. So we have to be careful with that. Some vessels do not allow boarding of personnel using the midship crane due to the capabilities of the crane. I would say that we have to also take into consideration that for a small workboat to approach a pilot ladder when the primary fenders are still alongside, that's a diameter of 3.5 meters, it is awkward. So they will have to approach with the bow or with the stern, which is not ideal because it is exposing the side to currents. So I would preferably be more pro to take risk mitigation factors in using the midship crane rather than going up a pilot ladder with the boat still having fenders alongside. We also have to make sure that the service boats are, the service that needs to be provided by the service boats is planned to ensure that the equipment is not damaged while going en route to the rendezvous position. Fenders and hoses available in Malta. Many fenders are the same size that we have out here, the 3.3 by 6.5 meters. Baby fenders are usually 1.5 by 3, a bit bigger than what we have out here. Hoses, C-flex hoses in majority, 12-inch or 10-inch for black cargoes and white cargoes. There is also 8-inch for LPG and LNG. And personnel baskets are usually the collapsible type. Not all oil majors accept collapsible type personnel baskets, but it is widely used. Contingency services are a bit of a hot issue. Some use contingency services not located in Malta, so their main base would be in another country, and they will need time to get to Malta. They might have a sub-base in Malta, but then you have to take also consideration into reaching the contingency site. For example, in this operation, the STS was conducted all the way, making way northwesterly with southeasterly seas following the ships. It ended up about 90 nautical miles away from Malta. So if there is a contingency there, getting to that contingency site is a challenge. So when taking into consideration how we are going to deal with a contingency, we have to take into consideration also not only where the STS will start, not the location where the STS will start, but also the location where the STS is going to end. What makes an STS service provider? Well, some provide hoses and fenders only. And some tankers that I have worked on, some tankers use as storage. They have their own fenders and hoses, so they don't even use a supplier of hoses and fenders. They have their own. The STS service provider needs to show, both at the planning stage and throughout the operation, including through the mooring master, that planning has been done, due diligence. We said it is a wide term, but they have to take into consideration whatever is reasonable to take into consideration. A generic illustration like this one clearly indicates that the opposite has been done. There's no planning in this one. There's no indication if those lines can actually be sent out. So such an illustration indicates lack of planning, I would say. Having said that, some tanker operators or charterers have requested STS notices, STS operations at immediate notice, as if they don't have time for planning. We have an STS operation. What time can you go out? If you can go out now, we start now. Where's the planning of it? Okay, so we have come across those circumstances, those situations. And when you fast-track operations like that, you might end up with the wrong equipment being sent out, like this small rope on the baby fender. If contact has to be made with that baby fender, that rope will break out of nowhere. It's too small. You can end up with transfer hoses designed for onshore transfers being sent out offshore and being damaged in the working conditions. Charterers, tanker operators, P&I clubs, well, hours of rest can be easily compromised from my experience when at the end of sea passage, the vessel goes directly, immediately for rigging fenders, and after rigging fenders, it proceeds directly for STS operation. All the crew is busy from end of passage till the time hoses are connected, which will be about 10 hours later at least, till the operation starts and everything. So I have seen on board, but crews or chief officers are a little bit proud to maybe discuss with their managers. In 200 operations or over that I have done, I have seen most vessels unable to cope with 2 watches, a cargo watch and a navigation watch. The OCIMF guide is clear that the demands of an STS operation will be high, will be onerous on the personnel. It makes reference to having additional personnel. It makes reference to making sure that hours of work are not compromised, but it remains talk from much of my experience. It remains just talk. I have seen chief officers cracking down in their control room. They won't be able to speak to you about that because they are too proud to say that. But I have seen chief officers cracking in their control room. And I have been with only 2 masters in these 6 years. I have been only with 2 masters who have actually stood up and refused to perform further operations before their crew are well rested. So I would see it like in charter parties, we have a definition of the safe port and safe berth, whatever, but what makes safe hours of rest, it's nowhere included. There's nothing. It is always placed on the master, but there's no reference of, there's no way how to deal with the commercial pressure versus the hours of rest. And in this point here, vessels unnecessarily alongside each other. Well, one of the risks in the conduct of STS operations is when the two ships are alongside each other. So if we had to mitigate that risk using normal methods, it would be either to minimize the risk or to eliminate it. Sometimes I have gone alongside and waited 12 hours for analysis, waited 20 hours for charterers to decide how to blend the cargo. Why would I have to stay 20 hours alongside a vessel doing nothing, with complete disregard to the risks involved? So I would like that to be addressed. I would like to have people that have their commercial pressures in the office deciding how the operation can be conducted so that it will be commercially viable and profitable. But these things have to be taken into account as well. Vessels crews need to be prepared. We have also discussed this earlier on. But how? How can we expect crews? It is required in checklist 1 for the ship to do an STS drill before the drill. How can you do a drill of something that you are not trained about? It's not a fire drill where everyone has attended a fire course, where everyone practices a fire drill week in, week out. It's an STS drill. It could be your first drill in 20 years at sea. It could be your first STS operation. So I believe that to have proper training on board, you need to have trainers on board, people with experience who can show what is expected. Because otherwise, in the absence of proper preparedness, crew will revert to a known model. It's like making fast in port, which is completely different from making fast with an STS operation. If I can bring some examples, crane operation in open seas. If you look closely, the runner and the block have swung round the jib when the jib was being operated. Mooring in open sea. This is the starboard quarter winch. Needs to send the line out to the port quarter. The lines have been sent out from the starboard quarter, round the railing, back in. Was there an STS drill? So I wouldn't blame them. They were not prepared, and I will have to deal with that. But these are the things that happen. The master, the mooring master and the master, the relationship is based on fate. So I would think that the master may be under the impression that the mooring master is like the port pilot. No. Mooring masters are not regulated like port pilots. So taking that for granted, if we don't do the screening of the mooring master of the POAC, we could be asking for trouble, because there is nothing else regulating a mooring master. It also says here that the master of each vessel should always remain in command and should not allow the safety to be compromised by the actions of others. Who are the others? The master may be under the impression that all the others, all those providing a service, are same like those providing services in port. Again, no. Tugboats in port, everyone is licensed. Outside, it all depends on our screening. Tools required for rapid disconnection are located at the cargo manifold. Yes, some for the equipment manufacturers, this one. You tell me who is going to use tools located at the manifold to disconnect hoses, whether they are there, whether they are rapid or not. I have never seen in the oil industry a quick release arrangement similar, akin of the emergency shutdown device on gas tankers, which is operated remotely, which provides for locking the cargo within the hose. So simply saying, 1 minute. Yeah, I've got only one slide, closing. So saying that we can disconnect it simply because we have the tools readily available at the manifold does not always work in an emergency such as this one or in other type of emergencies. It is not always to access the manifold safely. So to conclude, in my 1 minute, staying safe while successful, I would say that the industry, which should include all resources, all participating parties, including tanker owners, operators, charterers, and the various insurers involved, we need to be self-respected, self-disciplined, self-regulated, and conducive to continuous improvement. We cannot settle down idle. The industry needs to embrace accreditation systems. We need to have, like what DYNAMARINE is doing, we need to have people accredited to do the job. STS service providers need to keep up with industry best practices. They need to invest if necessary. We cannot go out with tugboats built in 1972 or 1974. We have better equipment to do that. STS service users need to make use of services that are up to standard and not substandard. So whoever is going to use an STS service, they have to make sure that the equipment, the services they are getting, is up to standard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Captain Ghirxi. I think you've actually been so honest. It's refreshing, because if you were selling STS off Malta and I was a ship owner, I wouldn't go there.
Yes, okay.
So I think it's very refreshing that you see the problems. And I'm going to ask a question to you. There's a few questions, but how much commercial pressure is on an owner off Malta? Now, I've dealt with quite a few collisions off Malta.
I would say
it's always been, we've got to do it now because time's money. Can you stop it and say you're not doing it?
I will stop it. I have no problems with stopping an operation. I have no problems with going out and not doing the operation. I have sometimes had to do that when I pressured to go out and try. I don't try. I either do it right or I don't do it at all. So how can you ask me to go out and try? So when I go out to try, I just go out, find the master in the bridge, Captain, there's a better window tomorrow, we'll do it tomorrow. But once I'm on board and it is my decision with the master, then there's no turning back. There's no turning back after that. So I have no problems dealing with commercial pressures, but I can understand that masters might have that problem, yes. Not all of them can deal with it, and it is not always something that I can address. I can only address an operation if I see there's something unsafe. But I'm not always aware of hours of rest not being observed. I'm not always aware of these things. I don't know what the ship has done before I came on board.
Okay, thank you again. One of the questions from the floor was about the joint plan. You've already mentioned of possibly insufficient time to have a proper plan in place.
Yes, that is
Again,
true.
on the back to commercial is that, oh, well, we'll make do. Don't worry, we haven't done it properly, but we'll get by.
Yes, many times what I have seen is for the joint plan, what I have seen is the standard STS plan, the one size fits all STS plan. And then the joint plan is only weather forecasts and type of approach and mooring plan. Sometimes even those are missing. But I always make time. I always see it very important to make time to discuss the approach and the mooring with the master on my ship, and then after that to discuss the same thing with the master of the other vessel. If it is not clear, if there is something that they are in doubt of, my advice is not to start. It has to be clear, precise, everyone knows what we are going into. Because at some stage, once we are in it, it is not always possible to abort. So we have to be clear what needs to be done.
Thank you.
Whether it is in writing or not, it has to be clear, it has to be discussed.
Two bottom questions, yes and no answers. Were you the STS provider in charge of the operational last photo? Yes or no?
No.
Good. And do you agree for the master to take control over the POAC? Yes or no?
Yes.
Good. Excellent.
But it is just not fair to assume that the master can shoulder every responsibility.
But the master is responsible.
The master is responsible. Yes.
Exactly. Thank you. Please.
Thank you.
Okay.